This video is brought to you by Mubi. Try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/SarahZ. That's mubi.com/SarahZ for a whole month of great cinema for free. Have you ever noticed how to some people the worst thing you can be is like other girls? Whether it's comparisons to rotten apples, being called derogatory terms based on one's clothing and hair, or having assumptions made about your character and intelligence because of how you dress, there's a significant backlash, largely by young women, against other women who look or dress in traditionally feminine ways or primarily enjoy popular TV and music. This often takes the form of phrases like, "I'm not like other girls," comics comparing an archetypical antagonist embodying femininity and conformity to our usually alternative protagonists, and videos on social media emphasizing how special and unusual it is to be a girl who isn't girly. Almost as soon as this phenomenon began to take hold, the backlash against it exploded. There exist entire internet groups exclusively designed to make fun of women who claim they're not like other girls, or NLOGs for short. One of such groups, r/notliketheothergirls on Reddit, has a little under 500,000 subscribers, where Facebook groups calling women who act this way pick-me's reach around 20,000. It's also been discussed a couple times on YouTube, with creators like Tiffany Ferg and Curtis Connor offering their own analysis as to why it's bad and why it's common. In particular, a lot of this backlash tends to come from women who are classified as other girls. No one enjoys feeling like they're being shamed for enjoying parties and pop music, and many people feel as though NLOGs are simply pitting women against one another. One Odyssey think piece by writer Kelsey Dilling called the phrase "I'm not like other girls" sexist, citing the idea that it imposes an artificial binary on women which fuels the notion that women should be shamed for choosing to look or dress in a certain way. This phenomenon is a particularly interesting one to examine, largely because a lot of us have been on both sides of the NLOG trend at different points in our lives. Many girls have at some point gone through this phase of hating this archetypical idea of other girls and eschewing anything feminine, and getting over this hatred is often considered a signifier of having grown up. On the other hand, even though many of us used to be NLOGs to a certain degree, I find there's a pretty tangible lack of empathy towards them and a lack of cohesive, agreed-upon reasons as to why this phenomenon is so popular in the first place. I mean, we're not seeing a mass occurrence of teenage boys claiming there's something wrong with other guys and actively striving to be as little like other guys as possible. Arguably, the closest thing to this is the Chad versus Virgin meme, which in its popular usage is typically making fun of this dichotomy instead of really reinforcing it. The people who do take it seriously tend to belong to a very specific subculture of red pillars and incels, and there doesn't seem to be a mass phenomenon across a huge number of young boys in the same way the NLOG phenomenon exists for young girls. So what's up with that? Why is this such a specific and gendered phenomenon? And are the people claiming they're not like other girls deserving of widespread hatred and mockery, or do they have a point? Well, let's look a little deeper. No two NLOGs are exactly the same, as there are multitudinous ways to be not like other girls. One might highlight her preference for the darker things in life, her outdoorsiness, her distaste for makeup and health food, or her enjoyment of creativity and reading. It's difficult to group women who are not like other girls into any one specific social category, although some people have certainly tried. Rather, the common thread tying all of these posts and comments together isn't really any unique identity that the NLOG has. The central focus of these posts isn't really on what they are, but what they are not. So what we really shouldn't be asking is, who are the NLOGs? It's, who are the other girls? Indeed, while what NLOGs are tends to vary by subculture, the universal image of what she isn't tends to be pretty consistent. That's the other girl, and regardless of whether you're a hunter who loves camo and mud, an alternative girl who loves Billie Eilish and chokers, or a girl who would rather read Harry Potter than go to a club, these posts seek to define you in opposition to the other girl. The idea of the other girl isn't particularly new, and it hasn't significantly evolved over time besides some slight aesthetic changes as to what it means to be popular. We see the other girl in all kinds of popular media. She's typically blonde, thin, popular, beautiful, dressed in expensive and revealing clothing, primarily enjoys mainstream movies and music, and is often implied to be sexually active with negative connotations attached to that activity. Take this passage from literary classic My Immortal, which provides a key representation of the quintessential other girl.
"We all went outside the Great Hall and looked in from a window. A fucking prep called Brittany from Gryffindor was standing next to us. She was wearing a pink mini and a Hillary Duff t-shirt, so we put up our middle fingers at her.
The other girl is also represented as an archetype in a good number of movies and TV shows, typically as antagonists. If you grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, you'd typically find yourself hating Cecilia from Aquamarine, Regina from Mean Girls, Taylor from She's All That, or Amanda from Addams Family Values. They're bad because they're mean and rich, but also because they're popular, vapid, and fundamentally shallower people than our multifaceted protagonists, who are often valued for their wit and lack of conformity to cultural norms. When these representations translate to other cultural contexts, like this meme about celebrating Eid, the aesthetic of the other girl changes slightly, but the central idea that she's popular and beautiful while you're an authentic human persists. Not all comics and posts that seek to distinguish between other girls and real girls actively include negative value judgments towards the other girl, although most do. Some mostly serve to highlight the protagonist's awkwardness compared to the flawless beauty of the other girl. Even here, though, the comics seem to impart a level of authenticity upon their protagonists that isn't awarded to the rest of society. While they're generically pretty, our protagonists are real, relatable humans. And this lack of authenticity is a really common thread of criticism against other girls. Take this image here, where all of the girls are dressed the exact same, are more interested in makeup and revealing clothing than intellectual pursuits, and don't seem to be capable of any individual rational thought. Conversely, our protagonist prefers to read and wear modest clothing. She's a fully fledged human who is actually capable of thinking for herself, an error in a society that values conformity. Unlike other girls who are mindless drones, she's a real, authentic human. Keep in mind, these comics and posts aren't just about people positioning themselves in opposition to one attractive, vapid woman. This woman is an archetype who's supposed to represent virtually all of female society besides our protagonist. They're insipid and unoriginal. I'm unique. I'm not like them. Unsurprisingly enough, the idea that this archetypical other girl even exists at all has come under fire. Like, sure, she has blonde hair and likes parties and makeup and Taylor Swift, but why does that also somehow mean she's a bad person or incapable of deep rational thought? Indeed, this concept tends to rely on a lot of false binaries when distinguishing between the protagonist and other girls. You can either be an independent human who likes reading in hoodies, or a vapid other girl who likes lipstick and miniskirts. The idea that you can be both is never really something brought up or addressed, thus the implication is that our protagonist is the only woman capable of deep thought and empathy. Indeed, this other girl isn't a real human being. She's a straw man embodying everything the author hates about society. So the other girl generally represents mainstream society's idealized image of what an attractive, desirable person looks like that's then applied to other women in general. There's also this portrayal of these women as very vapid and unintelligent people as opposed to our multifaceted and intelligent protagonists. But once again, why does this cultural phenomenon seem to almost exclusively exist within women? It's not like there are no cultural ideas of what an acceptably attractive man looks like. But broadly speaking, we're not seeing men who prefer listening to Black Bear over partying to Drake feel the need to excessively draw comics implying other guys are dumb and shallow and that they're the only multifaceted guys in the world. So why is that? Well, let's look at the first argument. Basically, it's misogyny. Hey girls, what if the other girl is good actually? What if the main reason N-logs don't like other girls is because society is fundamentally misogynistic? This is the thesis of a lot of arguments discussing N-logs, including that of a very good video by YouTuber Tiffany Ferg on the issue. Basically, she argues that we're taught from a very young age to hate all things typically associated with women. Nail polish, pink clothing, and anything else traditionally feminine, and deride it as stupid or unimportant. Consequently, we associate those negative descriptors with women who prefer traditionally feminine things as well, which is why we have such a hard time believing that women can be both intelligent and feminine, and why Elle Woods is the greatest film protagonist of all time for using her knowledge of hair perms to catch a murderer. Growing up in a society that often makes fun of women for girliness might lead us to believe that women are lesser, which we might apply both to ourselves and to other women. This is typically called internalized misogyny, which is a controversial term, but I'm going to use it here anyway because I'm feeling bold. According to this approach, our dislike for other women is reinforced in a few ways. One of these is popular media. We are from a young age inundated with young female protagonists who are typically notable for being the standout in a group of other girls. It's all over, especially in coming-of-age movies. A female protagonist, and possibly a couple of her friends, are intelligent and empathetic people, whereas every other girl in the story is the stereotype of an other girl, with little to no capacity for inner depth. Through her own positive characteristics, which are portrayed as more or less unique to her, she manages to overcome her circumstances, show up all the other girls, and occasionally find romance. With the advent of feminist lingo increasingly finding its way into our collective consciousness, there are a lot more movies nowadays that actively try to disrupt this and present the other girl as someone with a lot of inner depth. But for most of us who still didn't grow up on this type of movie, we were still socialized by the other stuff. "You're not like other girls" has been a compliment from men in romance movies and books for ages, and in universe, it's typically considered to be a very high compliment.
Ella, Frau, you are not like other girls.
I have never seen a woman in a movie respond to that with, "Okay, well, what's wrong with other girls? Why do you think so poorly of my entire gender that being as little like a girl as possible is a high compliment?" Just once, I want to see that. But alas, internalized misogyny. When you see and absorb these messages from a young age, it's easy to be tacitly taught that girls, on the whole, are bad and that not being like them is desirable. It's thus unsurprising that some women react to this lesson by trying very hard to distance themselves from other women. When the TV and movie representation of other girls is generally as shallow and unlikable people, while our female protagonists are often portrayed as unique in their depth and intelligence, it makes sense that a lot of young girls are going to start to believe that they are the only girl out there with intelligence and depth. This would also serve to explain why this is a phase a lot of women grow out of as they get older. While we never fully stop being susceptible to media messages, once our worldview becomes shaped a lot more by the people we interact with than by what coming-of-age movies tell us other women are like, we can gain a much more accurate and fair understanding of how our peers actually work. The fact that romance tends to factor into a lot of this media is also particularly interesting. Generally speaking, when love is involved in this kind of media, our protagonists tend to be praised by men for their lack of traditional femininity, which some might argue can kind of teach us to hate on femininity and other women for male approval. And the idea that N-logs are primarily seeking to distinguish themselves from other women so that men will like them or see them as cool is a really prevalent one. I already talked a bit about groups on Facebook and Reddit designed to make fun of N-logs, but what's also notable about this is that many of these groups specifically allude to the fact that N-logs are primarily seeking out approval from men. We have Facebook groups like Imagine Being Such a Pick-Me-Ass Bitch, who primarily criticize, in their words, women who degrade, humiliate, and shame other women in an attempt to get picked. Get picked tends to mean being romantically desired by a man, although this can also broadly mean wanting to be seen as cool or one of the guys by men. There are also groups with names like Your Shipment of Male Approval is on its way, which are common to invoke in response to women deriding other women. Once again, the implication is that N-logs are doing so explicitly to have men approve of them. I think overall, this is the most popular perception as to where the N-log phenomenon comes from, and it's definitely the one that gets talked about the most. Part of that, I think, comes from the fact that there is some truth to it. We do grow up with media representations of girls who are extremely shallow, feminine, and unintelligent being people who we should mock, and while it's not like films that celebrate women in all their forms don't exist, it's still a prevalent enough problem that it definitely has shaped a lot of our perceptions of what women were like when we were younger. However, I'm not entirely convinced that the primary reason the N-log phenomenon exists is because women with internalized misogyny are trying to get picked by men. To be honest, and no offense to the guys in my audience, but to me, this feels like it's further reinforcing the idea that no matter how a woman acts, she's doing it to impress a man. I mean, when we have prominent cultural figures asserting that the only reason a woman would wear makeup or high heels at work is to attract men, while we simultaneously have people claiming the only reason a woman would aggressively reject makeup and high heels is to attract men, it kind of makes you wonder whether people think we have any agency at all. And the idea that just because a woman is doing something shitty, it's because she wants a man to approve of her just furthers the notion that men are the central factors in all of the decisions we make. While this might be why some women choose to vocally distance themselves from other girls, I don't think this is broadly true. I have a horrible confession to make to you guys. From when I was 14 to maybe 15 and a half, I considered myself an anti-feminist. I pulled away from it about a year before Gamergate happened, mostly because I realized that a lot of what I was getting outraged about was carefully designed to make me angry and didn't represent the bulk of what feminism actually was. I only followed anti-social justice warriors, most of whom claimed to be leftists who just thought social justice warriors were making all of us look ridiculous. So the only representations of feminism I ever saw were the worst of this movement, carefully curated by those people. I would see TERFs who claimed all trans women were evil colonizers, people claiming air conditioners were sexist, and people saying they straight up didn't care about men's problems and only wanted supremacy. Now, in retrospect, obviously much of what I saw was either made up or taken out of context, and of the stuff that was true, it turns out you can hate TERFs while still believing in the tenets of intersectional feminism. But at the time, this is what I thought feminism was. And when I did venture into tags like anti-feminist women, I would see a lot of posts essentially claiming that any woman who didn't call herself a feminist was only doing so to make men like her. And at the time, that pissed me off so much. Like, you want to further the idea that women have autonomy, but you're saying women can't form independent beliefs without trying to impress a man? Who's the real sexist here? Now, obviously, in retrospect, I was the real sexist here, but the idea that women's primary motivations for what they do have to center around trying to impress guys is still kind of a shitty one, which, at least in my experience, wasn't true. And being told that was why I had my beliefs was one of the reasons I didn't realize sooner that I was being a massive dingus. So why else might women end up being N-logs? And is the idea of the quintessential N-log just as flawed as the idea of the quintessential other girl? Well, it's complicated. I think the idea that the main reason women might seek to distance themselves from more feminine women is internalized misogyny has some validity, but I think it also goes down a bit too easy for my taste. It's easy to see a woman loudly and actively declare, "I'm not like you," and conclude that the problem is endemic to her. She's experiencing internalized misogyny. She's infected with the same sickness society as a whole has, and she's in the wrong for shaming us for doing what we like. It's not entirely wrong, but it's overly simplistic and doesn't permit any real introspection on our part. For one thing, I think it's worth taking a look at which women feel the need to claim they're not like other women and push themselves away from feminine things. Let's look back at that tweet that asserts that growing up means getting over your unnecessary hatred of pink. Sure, some of that comes from the fact that women in movies who wear a lot of pink are portrayed as objects of our mockery. But for those of us who had N-log tendencies when we were younger, try to think back and remember what your relationship with pink clothing was like as a kid. For a lot of us, pink clothing, pink school supplies, pink birthday parties, and pink toys were pushed on us like nobody's business. As you grow up, there's a lot less active pressure to dress like a Disney princess all the time. But for a lot of young girls who grew up having long hair and pink clothes and Barbies foisted upon them with no alternative, there's something powerful in rejecting that. Now, a child saying, "I hate pink because pink is dumb," is not necessarily going to be the most articulate about her feelings, but for a lot of people, that hatred of feminine things didn't explicitly come from the notion that feminine things is bad so much as the notion that feminine is what you must be. Of course, those two things aren't mutually exclusive, but I think it's fair to say there's quite a bit more pressure in society for little girls to be feminine than for little girls to not be feminine. As a result, it makes sense that you're going to have a lot of people react by rejecting that pressure as vocally as they're able, even if they're not always the most articulate and woke about it. Like, yeah, women who aren't like other girls can be really shitty to women who like keeping their hair long or painting their nails or wearing makeup, but this characterization that hating feminine things explicitly means that you always have internalized misogyny misses out on a big part of the picture, and that's that there is a real pressure for many women to conform to society's mold of femininity. Of course, society's mold of femininity for grown-ass women doesn't look like frills and pink and Disney princesses, which is why it's a lot easier to not vocally hate those things when you're 25 as opposed to when you're 8. But there's still a pressure to look effortlessly beautiful, to wear makeup just enough that people can't tell you're wearing makeup, to have your hair done just right so it looks like you woke up looking perfect, to be perfectly smooth while never alluding to having to dedicate any time to it lest you look high maintenance. In effect, that means there exists a pressure to be the effortlessly beautiful other girl. This is reinforced both systemically and on a personal level. For one, there's real evidence to suggest that women who wear makeup in the workplace and are perceived as attractive are paid more and treated better than women who don't do this. This isn't universal in all jobs. You're probably not going to get a promotion for wearing heels on the job as a female welder. But societal pressure for women not to appear overly masculine is a real thing, and it absolutely hurts women who want to cut their hair or not shave their legs or go makeup free. Certainly, a lot of that pressure comes from society on the whole being misogynistic, but many women can and do reinforce those pressures on each other as well. The idea that you can apply this dynamic of oppression where less feminine women are somehow the oppressors of more feminine women doesn't really hold up. That doesn't mean women are never bullied for being too feminine or too pretty. If you bully someone, you are a bad person, but a lot of the conversations surrounding N-logs are too quick to frame it automatically as less feminine women always bullying more feminine women, which just doesn't reflect a lot of situations. People are quick to apply the term internalized misogyny to a woman scoffing at another woman for wearing heels, but the term internalized misogyny doesn't really get used to refer to women bullying other women for being lesbians or disabled or trans or not feminine enough. A lot of the time, when an N-Log says, "I'm not like you," it's because she's been told repeatedly by her peers, "You're not like us." And while yes, the stereotype of the airheaded, dumb blonde, mean other girl is just that, a stereotype, there absolutely do exist girls who exclude and bully other girls on the basis of how they look and how they dress, and it makes sense that many people, especially many young people who have been severely bullied and socially excluded from other girls, are not going to have the most favorable view of being like those other girls. In effect, when misogyny in this context is used more for a hatred of femininity than a hatred of women, that can equate being feminine with being a woman. And that can really screw over women who don't conform to gender roles in a variety of ways by implying they're somehow privileged or that their desire to not be feminine is a result of the hatred of women. Of course, that doesn't mean a girl who says, "Ugh, all the girls in my school are so stupid and airheaded and I'm the only one who's smart and reads books" is in the right. That's still an exceptionally narrow view to take on other women, and it still reinforces the idea that you have to choose between being a multifaceted human being and looking a certain way. But a lot of people do act and feel this way because they feel bullied and socially excluded. And while that doesn't excuse someone implying everyone in their gender but them is bad, it does mean we should broaden our scope in terms of who we criticize and why. I also think it's worth mentioning that creating the stereotype of this evil, less feminine woman who universalizes all other women as silly and trivial misses out on part of the picture. And that's that implying women are dumb and only care about boys and makeup and aren't capable of rational thought is 100% not unique to women. Guys do it too, and we don't have specific negative labels we ascribe only to guys for implying women are bad and dumb. Take this whole meme about guys versus girls in the locker room. Generally, the framing is that girls are busy gossiping and talking about frivolous things while guys are being quirky. Look how unique the boys are, guys. They're so quirky. In addition, we have people making fun of women on the basis of how they dress and what music they listen to, aka the whole problem with N-Logs in the first place, under the guise of making fun of N-Logs even when they haven't said or done anything to imply that about themselves. See memes like this, which make fun of girls who wear chokers and say they have a mental illness and listen to the Arctic Monkeys. See, if she smokes and dyes her hair and listens to Billie Eilish, that's bad. We don't like girls who do that. This is a thing many girls do, but not me. I don't do that. I don't listen to Billie Eilish and wear thigh highs because I'm not like other girls. In effect, what happens is that in our attempt to criticize women who mock and shame other women, we've just created another archetype of woman who it's okay to make fun of. And in doing so, we've created a really specific image of the type of person who shames women and is bad. Which means we've completely ignored the fact that A, many feminine women also bully and shame less feminine women, and B, many men also bully and shame both more and less feminine women, and in both these cases, that's not the behavior we're focusing on. Instead, we're focusing all our energy on criticizing the archetypical N-Log. This whole phenomenon of women loudly and aggressively insisting they're not like other girls is a really complicated one that happens for a variety of ways and in a variety of contexts. We've constructed this archetypical idea of what an other girl is, and she often gets mocked and treated as a representation of what all women are like. Attempts to explain why this happens ranges from these women are taught femininity is bad to these women are trying to attract men to a combination of these reasons. And certainly, insisting all girls but yourself are bad is a really shitty thing to do. It essentially implies your whole gender is lesser and ends up shaming women for harmless traits like enjoying certain music and certain styles of dress. If you talk about other women like this, that is bad and you should stop. That being said, while we've created this persona of a quintessential other girl to mock, we've also created this persona of a quintessential not like other girls girl to mock, and that's not better. In effect, that leads to us deciding that because some women who shame other women possess certain traits like dyeing your hair or wearing thigh highs, it is now acceptable and okay to mock women who have those traits. This is harmful for a few reasons. For one, it frames the bulk of women making fun of other women as N-Logs shaming other girls, even though a lot of this bullying actually happens the other way around, and is a motivating factor for girls to distance themselves from other girls in the first place. Some women who dress like this bully other women sometimes, so it's moral to make fun of all women who dress like this is bad logic whether you're talking about the girl in combat boots or the girl in kitten heels. It also obfuscates the fact that there are many men who do this to women too, and effectively creates a socially acceptable type of girl to mock under the guise of feminism. When there are men who make fun of women for being too girly, and there are also men who make fun of women for trying too hard to be quirky, it's not great that the only face of people who make fun of women for how they act and dress is another woman. Of course, many women do bully other women for a variety of reasons, and we also shouldn't pretend it's only men doing that either. I think on the whole, we just need to be more not shitty in terms of how we treat each other. Part of that means that we need to move away from these societal pressures that reinforce the idea that there's only one way to look or dress, or that rejecting this perspective means that there's something wrong with you as an individual. We also need to take a broader outlook in terms of understanding why large groups of people all feel a certain way, instead of just assuming they're inherently bad as individuals. When there's a massive gendered phenomenon of women seeking to distance themselves from other women in a way that doesn't really exist for men, we shouldn't and can't stop short of just assuming it's because women are somehow naturally predisposed to hate one another. Usually when this degree of hatred for one another is happening, it's because someone somewhere benefits from it. Even something as simple as we push girls into playing with aggressively pink toys and boys into playing with aggressively blue toys tends to happen because someone is making money off of it. And they don't want us to leave behind these made-up social roles and pressures, because not pushing one another into spending hundreds of dollars of makeup designed to make it look like you're not wearing makeup doesn't make them $1 billion. I watched a movie the other day from Norway called Blind, about an author who loses her sight and begins to stay in her apartment all the time. As she isolates herself from the rest of the world, she becomes more and more paranoid as time goes on that her husband doesn't care for her anymore, and she begins to imagine these complex scenarios about what's going on away from her. She quickly begins to lose hold on what is and isn't real, and at times we don't even know. It gets really complex and really cool very quickly, and I won't spoil it, but in effect, it's about the harms of isolation and the necessity of connecting with others. And the whole time I was watching it, I was just thinking about how when we're young girls who feel socially isolated from our peers, the ideas we construct of what their social lives must be like are so warped to the extent that we think we're the only people in the world with real feelings. We need to fight that, and we need to understand that there are entire industries predicated on pressuring us to look and be certain ways. Our kindness to one another and ourselves is a necessary antidote. Starting from a place of love for one another is never going to be universal, because there's people who are going to be dicks no matter what, and you're not going to dismantle every harmful social force in the world through kindness. But you also can't dismantle every harmful social force in the world without kindness, and it's a necessary starting point for treating one another with respect. I watched the film Blind on Mubi, who I'd like to thank for their sponsorship. Basically, Mubi is like having an ongoing film festival at your fingertips, which for someone like me who loves movies is amazing. Every day they hand select a new film, often something that's showing at a film festival somewhere, a cult classic, or an underrated pick that it's hard to find anywhere else. Movies stay on for 30 days, and a new one is handpicked by a human curator every day. And there are no ads, which means that no matter where you live, you basically have a permanent film festival at your fingertips. If you're interested in watching Blind, any of the amazing Halloween movies they have right now, like White Zombie with Bela Lugosi, or a host of really cool foreign films, you can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/SarahZ. That's mubi.com/SarahZ. God, I wish I had access to film festivals for free. I don't think I'm on that level of influencer yet. Be kind and roll credits. If you're wondering where I got this mug, I have fantastic news for you, and that is that this is one of my official merch items, which I am so excited about. The link is in my description, so if you're interested in getting this mug, these super cool enamel pins that I'm just like so proud of, they turned out amazing, I'm so excited about them. This awesome t-shirt with like the ZT logo on it, or these really cool stickers, which basically like you can do anything with. You can put them on your laptop, you can put them on your fridge, you can put them on your water bottle, you can put them on a cow and have it be an official Sarah Z cow. It's probably gonna start making video essays in a few days. You can do all of those amazing things. If you would like any of this merch, just follow the link in my description. Yes, I'm very happy and proud and excited about all of this. I love this mug so much.